everyone. Welcome to The Download, where we bring you discussion and analysis from a Catholic perspective. Today's Thursday, August 17th, 2023. I'm Christine Niles here with my two co-hosts, Trey Brock and Brad Eli. Wildfires are raging in Hawaii, and the death toll has passed 100. The fires are on the island of Maui, the second largest Hawaiian island. But amid the smoldering rubble in the town of Lahaina, the Catholic Church stands intact, completely untouched by the flames. Maria Lanakila Catholic Church remains completely untouched by the blaze, while neighboring buildings are damaged or destroyed. Monsignor Terence Watanabe, the vicar of Maui and Lanai for the Diocese of Honolulu, spoke to the press on Tuesday about what some are calling a miracle.
We really see this as an incredible miracle, so to speak. Spiritually, we always, look for the presence of God in our world, whether it's a rainbow or whether, it's other people's love for us or whatever. It's nice to know that God is with us and that his love and his presence is there.
Yeah.
It is amazing because right behind the church is the convent and the preschool and two school buildings plus the parish hall, and all of that burned. The church and the rectory next door to the church did not burn. And Father Koikose, who's the pastor there, went into the church 2 days after, and the inside of the church, nothing is touched. There's no damage. And the even greater thing was the fact that there were flowers at the foot of the altar, and those flowers were not withered from the heat.
That's quite remarkable. The name of that church, Maria Lanakila, is the Hawaiian equivalent of the title Our Lady of Victory. It's quite fitting. Elsewhere on the island, a historic Protestant church and a Buddhist temple were reportedly destroyed in the wildfires. So the pictures that we showed on the screen don't actually show how seemingly miraculous this was. If you look at the aerial photo, because I've seen several, it is amazing because you see the church, which is yellow, and it's just standing there untouched, with the rectory also untouched, but if you see all around it, completely burnt. Everything's just incinerated, ash, rubble, charred, and just the church is there. So that's why people are thinking, wow, God protected this church. It's amazing.
Yeah, the vicar there, Terence, he was actually commented that, it is a sign that God is still with us. And he was talking later on about how a lot of people may be devastated by this. And he said, if you're upset with God or whatever, that's fine. Just don't give God the silent treatment. And see that how God is still active in people's lives here and is visible with this church because people are still able to pray and stay in union with God. So.
Absolutely, and as we know, the death toll keeps rising. They've had cadaver dogs scouring the area, but they've only scoured a very small percentage. I know a couple of days it was like 3% that the cadaver dogs, and the death toll was at 96 when they had only swept 3%. So I imagine it's going to be pretty astronomical. But just a little interesting tidbit about that church. The Latin Mass community was actually going to that church, which is very interesting. There was another Catholic church on Maui that was destroyed by the fire. This one, for whatever reason, was preserved. And I think it's pretty amazing, too, that these flowers at the altar, they weren't even withered. I mean, you'd imagine with the intense heat, because that's some intense heat. You'd imagine they would at least have been withered, and they weren't. So this reminds me a bit of the Great Chicago Fire and what they're called, also the Great Peshtigo Fire. I don't know if you're familiar with that. A lot of people don't know this, but that's another instance in which Our Lady miraculously protected a church. This one in Wisconsin. It's Our Lady of Champion Shrine. It is the only approved Marian apparition in the United States. I actually didn't know this when I was studying this. Only approved apparition in the United States. And it started back in 1859. Our Lady started appearing to a Belgian nun named Adele Bries. And she was essentially saying, I want you to gather all the children in this wild territory, teach them about the faith, teach them how to make the sign of the cross, teach them the catechism. And she was appearing for a number of years. And you fast forward to, I believe it was 1871, you had the Great Chicago Fire that completely devastated Chicago. And at the same time, you had the Great Peshtigo Fire in Robinsonville, Wisconsin, which today is called Champion. That's where the shrine is. Same exact area where a lady was appearing to this nun. And Sister Adele Bries and all the nuns of the area they knew they couldn't survive this massive fire. I mean, it was a horrible death toll, and it's coming to the church. And so they actually spent the night doing a procession with the statue of Our Lady and praying the rosary all night long, with the priest, with the sisters, with the community coming, the locals coming, everybody just on their knees begging Our Lady, protect us from this fire. The next morning, they wake up to find that literally there's a circle right around their church, and witnesses could actually walk up to the circle of, you could see like the singed grass where it was just completely brown, and then it just stops. And so, of course, they're calling that a miracle. But that kind of reminds me a little of what happened in Maui with this church.
Yeah, as the people are trying to get their lives in order there, when Father Monsignor Terrence was actually being asked a little bit later on in the video there about, you know, God's allowing evil and, you know, blaming where was God and all this and that, harken back to some very difficult times in the kingdom of Hawaii with regard to a leprosy column, a colony for those with leprosy that was Hansen's disease. Actually, didn't have a cure for it at the time. So in 1840 there was a person who's became very famous. He became Saint Damien of Molokai. He was born in Belgium. He was a missionary, and he went to the kingdom that back then was called Kingdom of Hawaii, and he was actually ordained there in 1864. And then the local bishop wanted someone to volunteer. He didn't want to actually put you in harm's way necessarily of leprosy, which really, you know, harkens back to this whole thing about the COVID, you know, and no one wanted to administer because, oh my goodness, you could catch, you know, pneumonia or something. Anyway, he and 3 others volunteered to go to this one island over from Maui is Molokai, and that is where the leprosy colony was set up by the Kingdom of Hawaii, and this bishop wanted them to go to administer to those with leprosy. So they went there, and there was, and this was in 1878. He arrived there, and then for the next 7 years he worked amongst the lepers. He's trying to get to them. Now, I saw the movie. Mm-hmm. And it's so desolate there. And when you're sent there, originally it was just, you're going to die there. You're separated from the local community. And this is what I wanted to bring up. If there's anybody from Hawaii watching this, yes, the devastation with the fire and everything like that, but you're still, maybe we'll get financial assistance to help rebuild, or you'll have friends and neighbors there can help rebuild. You still have the land right there. You still have your freedom. When you were contracting leprosy back in the day, you're sent to this remote corner of the island of Molokai, and that's it. It's almost like a death sentence right there.
They had no cure at the time.
And there was nobody there to minister to you. I don't have the sacraments there, almost like COVID was in 2020. And there was no, anyway, he went there, and he's helping him build houses, build a church. He gets cemetery to bury the dead. And he's working there, and then one day, of course, in the movies that showed that he had scalding water splashed on his feet, and he couldn't feel that. And that's when he knew that he had leprosy. And so he struggled on for 4 more years with that, and finally succumbed to that. He was bedridden in March and died in April, the year 1889. Only 49 years old at that time. But in that amount of time, the number of people that he brought hope to, and it was also, this is a fun fact on him, if it's even a fun fact, the fact when he went to go to confession. He himself would go to confession. There would be a ship that would come up to the island, and he would have to yell his confession up, because that person's not going to come down and hear your confession. I don't want leprosy. So it's extremely humiliating. You know, everybody on the ship hears your confession because you're yelling it out up above board. And he would do that in order to bring hope and peace and salvation to the people on that island. So for me, I was just thinking, oh my goodness, that is so desolate and devastating, even more so than a large portion of Maui burning was that devastation that they had back then. So other people, and we bring this up not to say to minimize, but to actually say other people also in that area have really gone through trying times and have struggled onward and lived their faith out. And that faith was something that was very a big anchor, a strong anchor for them.
And that's the good that can come out of situations like that. And we know that after his death, I think there were a number of Protestants who were attacking his reputation, Saint Damien's reputation, saying he was given too much credit for the work that he was doing. And there was a man named Robert Louis Stevenson. He was a famous Scottish novelist. He was actually raised Calvinist. He wasn't religious at all, so he's definitely not Catholic. And he came to St. Damian's defense and said, no, like, look at what he was doing with his life, and the others that were with them going into, this sick and those who were ill, and administering unto them as they should as priests, and defended his reputation. And there's actually a recent news story that I've kind of looked into a little bit before we got on today. There's speaking of Protestants, the Billy Graham Rapid Response Team, that's what they call themselves, and it's a group of, they're Protestant, but they have 10 chaplains right now, and they are providing what they call emotional and spiritual support to the people of Maui, and I'm sure other parts of Hawaii. But I was just thinking, is obviously as Protestants, they don't have the fullness of the gospel. So what they're trying to preach the gospel to them. Obviously, that's great, and God's going to bring good out of that and everything. But in the midst of all of that chaos going on right now, it'd be cool to see masses offered, in the midst of the rubble, or Catholics going around and preaching the gospel to all those people. But it's a cool idea, that Billy Graham Rapid Response Team. It'd be nice to have a Catholic version of that, but yeah.
Yeah. But no, I mean, St. Damian's life was just absolutely amazing. For one, when he first came to the island, as I think the film shows, I watched that years ago, the people there were living in total immorality. I mean, there was so much immorality going on, a lot of immorality, people living in sin and debauchery and drunkenness and all sorts of things. So he had to come there and bring spiritual order to that place, pretty much by himself. And so obviously he did that through his holiness of life and catechism and all that kind of thing. And so he did. He converted many souls. And something else too is he volunteered to go to the island knowing that this was basically a death sentence. He knew that, because at the time there was no cure for leprosy. So you're put away on this island, and that's where you go to die, period. Everybody understood that. We are forsaken, we're desolate, we're abandoned. This is where we're going to die. And anybody knew, if I visit that island, I'm going to contract leprosy and I will also die. He knew that going in there, and he volunteered to go, knowing this was a death sentence on me. But again, this is the example of Christ, the life of sacrifice, heroic sacrifice, knowing that I'm going to go down and lay down my life for these people, these poor lambs who need God. And it reminds me a little bit of the priests during the time of Reformation England. A lot of them, during the persecution under King Henry VIII and also under Queen Elizabeth, these priests became hunted priests. You were no longer allowed to be a priest. And if you were caught, it was a death sentence for you. So many of these priests fled to France. They went to the city of Douay, which is where we get the Douay-Rheims Bible. That's where it was translated. They studied there. They went to seminary, became ordained, in order to go back to England as undercover priests and minister to the people of England, knowing that that was a death sentence for them, because many of them did get caught. Many of them were hanged, drawn, and quartered, which is horrible torture before you die, and then they're killed. Like St. Edmund Campion, that was his life. And he was one of the great orators, was incredibly respected at the time. Queen Elizabeth knew who he was. He was studying at Oxford. He was like this incredible orator and scholar. He has this tremendous conversion. He goes over to Douay, gets trained up as a priest, and then he comes back. And, he ends up a martyr, incredible martyr. But I mean, it just reminds me of these priests laying down their lives willingly, knowing, if I go back, this is a death sentence, but it's something I'm willing to do, to lay down my life for these people.
I'd like to give, the priests are watching, or if seminarians or potential seminarians watching this show, you kind of have to start figuring out now what type of priest you want to be like. Are you going to be the type that's going to close up shop at the first sniffle of COVID? Because you're going to have a COVID 2024 or 2025 or COVID 2026. And these fires just keep popping up. It was California burning down major parts of the city, and these Canadian, Ontario, and Maui. It's just like more and more and more of these fires are going on. Is this arson? Is this something else going on? We don't know. Why is this? All these fires just seem devastating fires just popping up. Just coincidence that they all happen to be out there, or is it something more nefarious going on? We don't know. But at the same time, probably not going to get any better going forward, because we have a civilization, worldwide civilization, that's really has jettisoned God, and a lot of these type of things, bring us back to focusing on what really is real. And talking about the Protestants there back in St. Damian's time, Damian Malachi, he became so famous that a lot of Protestants themselves actually got on board with him and raised large amounts of money for his work that he was doing there. And so, yes, there always is some naysayers amongst Catholic and non-Catholics and Protestants and that, but his work was so transparent that, and it was so evident of what he was accomplishing and how sacrificial he was, that it became very, very obvious to people who weren't Catholic whatsoever, no buy-in, they don't care. That guy is doing God's work right there, and it became they backed him.
And when you're in situations like that where you just have nothing, if you have leprosy, like what St. Damien was dealing with over there, or these people with the wildfires, when you have nothing, it's fair to say you're a little bit more open to the religious. You're a little bit more open to spirituality, and so it's all the more reason. It's almost like the perfect situation for not just priests to go into, but for anybody who's religious to go into, because those people are open, seem to be more open to all that during those times. I know that, like you mentioned during COVID, all these people, I can never get over the elderly who were they were
nursing homes.
Yeah, I remember there was
our governor did that.
Yeah, and I'm from Houston, Texas, and there was a priest that I knew. My dad and I used to go see him, once every couple of months, and he was in it was actually a Catholic nursing home sort of situation. He was there for a couple of years, and when COVID hit, the lady at the front desk, she told my dad, because he told me he was going to see him, and she said, "Oh, you can't see him because COVID and all that." And I was just thinking, like, this poor guy has nobody visiting him. He's basically on his deathbed, and nobody can visit him. So it seems to me, and we've talked about this before, that the best priests, in my opinion, are the ones who, kind of said, screw that, ran in there. And if somebody does need their last rites, those little orders, they don't matter, because the faith transcends all of that. But I'm sure that's what St. Damien was doing, and that's what any good priest would be doing during those times.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, priests out there, seminaries out there, do need to be asking, what sort of priest am I going to be? And that's a question that every seminary needs to think before he goes into seminary. It reminds me of what Archbishop Sheen wrote in his wonderful book, The Priest is Not His Own, where it really, he hones in on what a priest actually is, truly fundamentally at the core of his being. Yes, he's a teacher. Yes, he's an administrator. Yes, he does all these he serves, but fundamentally he's a victim. He is a victim, just like Christ is a victim. And he unites himself with Christ's victimhood on the cross when he offers up, the Mass. And the priest has to understand that going in. When I go into my vocation means I die to myself daily. I am dying to myself, whether it's through physical martyrdom or just through interior martyrdom, whatever it may be. But that's fundamentally what I am supposed to do as a priest. So that when they encounter all these incredible difficulties and trials in priesthood, which every priest will, they have that correct mindset. So many priests leave the priesthood because they don't think that way. They don't think, I'm meant to be a victim. I'm meant to die to myself. I'm meant to be crucified on the cross with Christ on a daily basis. It reminds me a little bit of Pope John Paul II when he was a young priest. I read a biography of him, really great biography by George Weigel. And Pope John Paul II, as a young priest, he was known to every morning go to adoration. Okay, he was always going to adoration. And the other priests would actually be sitting there at the cafe kind of smoking their cigarettes, and they'd sort of like look at him with curiosity, like, oh, look at him running off to the adoration chapel. And they're just sitting, not like there's anything wrong with a priest sitting down and enjoying a cigarette. I have no, but the point is the contrast, right, between Pope John Paul II's understanding of his priesthood and how I need to go to be with my Lord, and the others who were just kind of sitting back and, close up shop at a certain time, me time, that kind of thing.
Well, Bishop Sheen was very strong about saying, everybody goes to the priesthood. Yeah, they're all on board with being a priest. I'm going to dress the part, and I'm going to be up on the altar, but the victim part, they'll say these hands are made for chalices and not calluses, right? And and so they don't see themselves. And he said this: they don't want to be the victim. They want to be the offerer, but not the offered. But with these fires, which are going to keep coming. They're just a pattern, and they're going to keep happening. The cause is yet out there. I don't know if we can just blame climate change. I think that's the big narrative. There's, I think, already a book written about the Maui fires and how it's climate change came out. And it's like, how'd you know
No
that was
evidence of
going
that.
to happen? Wow. It's like coming up with a for you. I don't want to go there because we might get banned. So anyway, the idea, this is the analogy. When the parable of the weed and the sowers, and Jesus goes out to put the sower goes out to sow the seed. Some of that seed falls amongst the briars and the brambles and gets choked, right? That's part of the parable. And sometimes having all those briars and brambles burned off around you allows that seed to grow, right? And so that's sometimes what's going on in these, there are people who are going to benefit spiritually because of this. Unfortunately, there will be some people that see this as God, why didn't you save me from this devastation? You must be a mean God. And it's like saying, well, why did God allow a mass shooting in a school? God's like, well, don't blame me. I wasn't allowed in. I don't have prayer in the school or anything. And these people who are going to turn away from God probably didn't have God too much in their life to begin with. But there will be some people who will benefit by having all that taken down. Like you say, there's, when there's nothing left around you, there's only God. And so hopefully it'll free them up to turn to God. And it'll be a time, shout out to our viewers here to pray for them, and not just pray that they get all the material stuff back, but that the spiritual good, that's, God allows evil in order to bring forth a higher good. That's a Catholic dogma. That's why God allows evil. Absolutely, 100%. If you Google it, look it up, Catholic Church teaching, God allows evil to bring forth a higher good. And sometimes allowing all those brambles and all that, you're not going to take that with you when you go anyway. And it's not to minimize their suffering. People lost their livelihood and they have nothing and all this. And that is, for all of us, is devastating. But at the same time, if their salvation can come out of it, if they get an increased sanctity out of this, if they get rebuilt, but not just rebuilding their material stuff, but rebuilding interiorly too. What is most important in my life? Was it that new vase that I just bought, or is it actually getting to adoration, getting to Mass, getting straight with God, and that type of thing? If that good came out of it, then that is good that came out of it.
Yeah, and that's the essence of the faith. Good coming from evil. That's the essence of our Catholic faith. And to your point about people sort of taking advantage of the situation and the nefarious timing of a book coming out or whatever it is. There's a guy.
Yeah, I heard just the other day there was a book came out already about Maui fires. How was all climate change?
Yeah, it's all ready to go.
Was that Chat GPT just cranking that out?
There was a guy who is. He was talking about how he was a native resident of Hawaii, of Maui, I think it was, and he was talking about how realtors were already calling the families, asking to buy their houses and all that stuff, and they were trying to take advantage of the situation. I was like, that's some evil stuff. And there was another guy who was. He was complaining about how we're not getting the aid that we need right now, and he said that Hawaii should change their name to Ukraine, and money would start flowing in. And so, but no, to go back to your point about the priesthood and Brad's point about good coming from evil and all of that, I think it's a call for everybody to practice not just the corporal works of mercy. That's what all this stuff is. That's what St. Damian's story is. Feed the hungry. I have my list in front of me so I don't screw it up. But feed the hungry, give water to the thirsty, clothe the naked, shelter the homeless, visit the sick, visit the imprisoned, and ransom the captive, bury the dead. All of these things. I mean, that's kind of hitting at the heart of what's going on in Maui right now. What was going on with St. Damian. And obviously that's something that not just priests are called to do, but laymen are called to do. This corporal and spiritual works of mercy, that's a perfect opportunity. All of these things, they're perfect opportunities for people to get right with their spiritual lives.
I gotta say, if you don't believe me, Dr. Miles Stone's, okay, Fire and Fury, the story of the 2023 Maui fires and its implications for climate change.
Oh no.
Okay, look it up right there.
They're still burning.
I know, right? And man, you guys are fast, or was this already preset? And this is why if someone is, just for instance, I'm not trying to, figure out all this stuff, and I don't have the answers, but if somebody wanted to buy up real estate, hey, why don't you start a fire? Okay, arson. We know that in California they caught people committing arson in many locations where they were just going along starting fires. Why did you start them there? I don't know. But if you start them here, then you got ready to buy up, a lot of this beachfront property for a low price because you want to build something else, you would have bulldozed it anyway. people, if you're in the tank for like abortion and killing babies and everything else, starting a fire to burn somebody out, is that a big deal to you, really? So, you know, we always think, oh my goodness, people couldn't do that. Over half the country's in the tank for killing babies. So,
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
true.
I mean, the conscience is not there right now.
Yeah.
And anything that's going to be in it for me. So just throw that out there, that the fact that, yeah, there are books already written about this. Yeah, people are trying to buy up real estate already. You know, why these fires happen. Don't necessarily blame God right away. You know, maybe look at some real estate developer or somebody else who wants to profit from this stuff.
But yeah, just going back to what we were talking about, the priest being the victim and approaching his priesthood with that understanding, I actually, and you also talking about how this corporal works of mercy aren't just limited to priests, all of us have to exercise them. I think if more married people also went into their marriages with that understanding that I'm going into this with this idea of sacrifice. I die daily. I die daily as a spouse. I die daily as a parent. My whole life is sacrifice. If more people went into marriage with that understanding, oh gosh, the number of divorces would just go down because people would understand, yeah, what I'm going into, this is not just about me and fulfilling my needs and satisfying my needs. This is fundamentally about sacrifice. And that really is the moral and the lesson for every single Christian out there, because we are called to a life of sacrifice.
And because I know that so well, going into my marriage, I always want to give ample opportunity for my wife to have sacrifice. So I never miss an opportunity to give her an opportunity to have sacrifice, so she can merit, because that's my
yeah, but seriously, because so many mothers feel overwhelmed, right, by having babies, and they want to have abortions because it's just, they don't think of it as going into as this is sacrifice. But if you as a mother understand this is going to take, you know, I mean, have sex, have babies, a lot of sacrifice. If they go into that knowing that, they won't be so overwhelmed. You know, they'll understand this is my life. I'm meant to give myself to them. But I think so many women today have been taught to be selfish, and that I shouldn't have to give myself so much. This is too hard. I don't want to do this.
Yeah, it all goes back to martyrdom, and we talked about St. Maximilian Kolbe a couple days ago. Either white or red, that's what the faith is all about, and that's just you're dying to yourself and you're letting Christ live through you, and that's the essence of the faith. But that's martyrdom it's by its very nature sacrificial, like you just said.
And that's why the difference between Protestantism and Catholicism, for me, the one deciding factor is we have Christ still on the cross. In his mystical body, that sacrifice of Calvary is still working its way out. As St. Paul said in Hebrews 6:6, I make up for whatever's lacking in the sufferings of Christ. Well, nothing was lacking, but in the sense that it hasn't been fulfilled yet. And so as an extension of Christ's mystical body, that we are still meriting redemptive, sacrificial offering. That's why not calling Mary, you know, co-redemptrix. We're all co-redemptrix. We're all offering up redemptive sacrifices, and that's what your sacrifice is, salvific. You know, it brings grace in that. And so look to Christ on the cross, whether you're in a home, whether you're in a parish, whether you're experiencing these fires and stuff, because it's by that sacrifice that you're actually meriting, and always make bank out of your suffering.
And it's always the paradox too. Look to Christ crucified, and it's the paradox of the faith where that's actually where freedom and joy and liberation is found. That's the only place where that's found. People get intimidated by it. Oh, Christ on the cross, Calvary, all that stuff. But it's the paradox of the whole thing. You unite yourself to Christ crucified, and that's where the freedom comes. That's where the joy.
And he will help you carry your cross. So excellent points, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode of The Download. Now, please join us as we finish in prayer, begging Our Lady's intercession for our nation and our church, and also for the people of Maui. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Salve Regina, Mater Misericordiae, vita dulcedo et spes nostra salve. A te clamamus, exules Filii Eve. A te suspiramus, gementes efflentes, in hac lacrimarum vale. Ea ergo advocata nostra, iros tuos misericordias oculos ad nos converte, et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium oscende, O clemens, O pia, O dulcis Virgo Maria. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Thank you again for joining us for The Download. We premiere a new episode like this every weekday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. From all of us here at Church Militant, God bless you.